to write, like a growth Bible. So more of like not just a sales book, but like a growth book for, like, say if you had like a C-level team and you had a few people and help them kind of all understand, like, what are the few things that really drive company growth or stop it.
So what, that's the power. Most successful businesses have a simple business model, a very simple sales cycle, and they just kept evolving, but they've kept it pretty simple. I want you to take notes. I want you to apply this in your business immediately, because that's where the key to success.
Like, growth can be a system, and there's a system to it, and you just need to kind of look at your business that way, and identify those bottlenecks, which again these books can help you do, and just kind of understand, okay, what do I need to do next?
All right, guys, thanks for joining Ashish Janiani. Wherever you are, if you are an entrepreneur, you are into sales as a business, whether it's a big organization, a small organization, or a family business, you're on the right channel, because this is where we explore different strategies related to sales from different great, amazing trainers, speakers, authors, and gurus of the industry. And today's guest is no less this man. I don't know where to start, right? Because he's actually a very, very rare human being. This man has created billions of dollars in revenue for Salesforce, Oracle, Red Hat, amongst other companies. Just think about that for a moment. His book, Predictable Revenue, has been called the Sales Bible of the Silicon Valley, and his other book is also on the best-selling list. Of course, needless to say, the Predictable Revenue is a bestseller. This guy is married with 9 kids. Half of those kids are adopted. That's pretty sweet. But how does he make all that time? Because he has a $5 million business under the name of Predictable Revenue, for which he's a co-CEO, and he works only 20 hours a week. I mean, just think about, while I'm talking to you, I'm just wondering about how can you have that life? You only find this life in books, but this man's living it. He's helping the biggest of corporates enhance their sales. And while he's got his life together, very excited, I'm super excited to have Aaron Ross with us today, who will be joining us. Please make sure that you take notes, because I'll be asking him some very important questions. Hey, Aaron, how are you?
Hey, Ashish.
Okay, great. All right. So, Aaron, I want to dig a little deeper today into the concepts that we discussed. And I want you to know that I started listening to your audio on script. I'd love to know first, why do we have 2 books? If you can give us some insights into these 2.
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously the first book, and I happen to have them here, was the Predictable Revenue book, which really was coming out of my experience of Salesforce.com in creating that outbound sales team and seeing some of the problems that companies had around not having predictable lead generation. Right? And the classic mistake was thinking, all right, if we want to double our sales, we need twice as many salespeople. Well, no, you need. So that was and they called that the Sales Bible of Silicon Valley. But a few years later, when it really felt like we want to do a new book, and I joined forces with Jason Lemkin, who started SaaStr. But our goal, and Jason founded a company called EchoSign and sold that to Adobe. But he took EchoSign from 0 to more than 100 million in recurring revenue. Now we wanted to write, like a growth Bible. So more of like not just a sales book, but like a growth book for, like, say if you had like a C-level team and you had a few people and help them kind of all understand, like, what are the few things that really drive company growth or stop it. So in this case, for example, we came up with like 7 topics. The first 4 are really like very tactical sales and marketing topics, like nailing a niche, lead generation, building a scalable sales team, and like increasing deal sizes. And they can build on the Predictable Revenue book, kind of update some of the ideas and expand on them. But really it's like, what are the things, if you want to grow a company and and I've heard people say, hey, it's the best business book they've read, but really meant to be like kind of that C-level leadership growth Bible. You have a company.
Okay. And Aaron, this interview is so important for all of us. I'll give you a background of the audience that is going to be listening to this, including me. A lot of us have businesses which are successful in terms of they're profitable, but we've not really figured out the Silicon Valley game, right? We've got stuck in terms of we've got that cycle, we've got those revenues, but we are not able to expand. Uh, can you pick up that problem that people have, including me, that we've got a team, we've got sales, we are doing well, but that dream of being, a unicorn one day, or being able to create billions of revenues seems like it's just going to be a dream, because I think you figured something out that you're sharing in these books that we haven't, and we are not able to look at it. Can you please explain that to us? What is the difference between this and what you've got in these books?
Yeah, up to. And now it's like for most people, the idea of creating billions of revenue is going to be a dream. All right, that's not for everybody. So, and that's all right. But what you're really talking about is that it's really in the Impossible to Inevitable book is it really goes into like that exact challenge you're talking about, which is, hey, I've got a company, we've plateaued. I'm not sure why and what to do about it. So for some companies, that is somewhere in like the few hundred thousand, like a lot of companies plateau and a few $100,000 to maybe 5 to 10 million in revenue range, US dollars. Pretty typical. Other companies might plateau and they're much bigger. But let's just talk about numbers. So for most companies are in that, under $10 million and they're kind of feeling like they're plateaued. Usually, the most common reason is really about like the first section of the Impossible book. It's called Nailing a Niche. So the idea is you want to grow, but you're actually not ready to grow. And there can be a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons, again, is most of your growth has come from word of mouth and relationships. And you've kind of like maxed those out. And you don't have the skill, you don't have the ability to grow outside without relationships. So here's a good clue if you hit this. It's if you spent money on online advertising or outbound prospecting or outbound marketing, and you haven't been able to make that work at all. There's no return. You haven't nailed the need. So that's one clue. So what does it take to be able to spend money on paid growth, right? So it could be outbound prospecting, again, it could be outbound marketing, to kind of connect with people who don't know you and actually generate sales that way. And most companies, again, generate sales with people who don't know you or your company. And it's a lot harder than people realize. That's the most common reason people have struggled to grow and have plateaued. Relationships are great, and you want to use them to get off the ground. But then if you're dependent on them for growth in the future, or if you're dependent on kind of like a brand, then you are going to be typically limited.
Okay. Let me take an example so that we can practically implement this. Let's say I've got a company, started with relations, started with cold calls, got some clients on board, serve those clients well, and it can be any particular product, right? Tangible, intangible. Got some referrals in, but it's not really big. It's just kind of happening. And I've now started with the social media team. I've got a team, they're doing some marketing. They figured out LinkedIn and Instagram to be probably the best channels to do that. And we've got some leads, and those leads are converting. But now we've got stuck. So we are getting results by social media along with everything else that we are doing. But it feels like, that's the limit that we have. So by what you're saying, right, how do I go to the next level? If this were the example.
Yeah.
Social media was working in some capacity.
Well, yeah, it's one thing is, you say you're getting leads off of social media. All right, well, when we talk about nailing a niche, it's really two challenges. One, how do you get leads in the first place off of a place like social media? And then two, what does it take to close them into a customer? So there's lots of companies who get a ton of leads, but they don't turn into customers. They don't turn into revenue. Kind of why is that? So that's one challenge. The other is, okay, let's say you are signing some customers up. Really common is you are signing up maybe customers that are too small or the wrong type. So there's, again, going back to the Impossible book, section 4 is called double your deal size. right? And there's the painful truth there, which is it's hard to build a big business out of small deals. And small is all relative, right? So for one company, small might be $100 a month. For another company, small might be $10,000 a month. So it's really for your business. And so we say, look, if you look at that top 10 or 20% of your customers, the ones that have sort of paid you the most money and they've had the best results, those bigger deals, how do you define your ideal customer typically around those types of big, and how do you go up market? How do you start to increase your average deal size, double it or triple it? There's an exercise in the book called 10X, right? What would it take to take your biggest few deals and do deals that are 10 times that? So what kind of customer would look like that? What would they need from you? How would you have to adapt your business to be able to deliver on that? So that's another thing, which is stopping sort of chasing all the customers and focus on the ones that are they're ideal and kind of bigger, more profitable.
Okay. And from the experience that you have dealing with all these big corporations, right? I mean, it's massive. Is there a pattern to a lot of customers and a small subscription plan? Is that a better way to go, whether it's Netflix or Amazon? Or do you think that having few customers who pay you a lot is a better business plan? Is there something like that? Or am I just making that up? It's not really like that. It depends on.
No, I mean, it's kind of one or the other. It's really like, where do you feel called to take your business first? Because some people really want to sell business to business, which is kind of what I'm been a specialist in. Some people love consumers. That's what they understand that. So I think where it's dangerous is it's kind of in the middle where you're trying to sell to lots of customers. Like it's hard, and it's lots of small business customers, and it's very small deal sizes, and you require salespeople. So it's one of these things where if you require salespeople to sell it, you have to charge more in order to be profitable. You can't sell. It either has to be like really like an Amazon, or Netflix, really inexpensive, and you never have to talk to them except for support. Or if you have salespeople involved, you have to be charging, I don't know, in the States it might be at least $300 a month per customer. So it's kind of like finding the right balance between how much help do they need in the profitability. And because the classic mistake is sales cycles, and like you're selling B2B and it takes a lot of work to sell them and you're not charging enough. And so you're just not making much money ultimately. And especially in services companies, consulting or coaching or, outsourcing, like the small customers can often be really challenging because especially the ones that are they have to be really careful with money. So they demand a lot. They often don't have a lot of the internal resources to really implement the project they're doing and so have great success. And they're not able to pay you much, and they don't necessarily stay for a while. So in general, I mean, small customers are great for what they are. Like they build community, they get you off the ground, they can give you feedback on your service or product. But when, like you're talking about, when you want to grow, focusing on fewer, bigger, better customers or fewer, bigger, better channel partners.
Wow. Okay. All right.
And having that discipline to say, I'm not going to chase every single customer that comes along. Like I need to really focus on the more specific types of ideal customers that value what I'm doing and are able to pay for it.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is coming back to prospecting, right? How do you prospect? How much do you know about your market, and how do you reach out to that market? In terms of your books and even theories that we spoke about last time as well, which I wanted to dig deeper into, you said that not every salesperson should prospect in a team, and there's a very genuine reason that you have for that. So how should a company look at prospecting? If a company has, let's say, up to 100 employees, how should that company look at it? If it's got 100 to 1,000 employees, how should they look at it? Let's assume that 25% of these companies, the sales team of these companies is made of 25% of the workforce.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I feel like I'm going back to the Impossible book again, because this has a section on that, which is kind of how do you know you should be doing prospecting or not. So there's some company, like every company should have a customer success function. Every company should do content marketing, but not every company should do outbound prospecting. I mean, there's ways any company could do it, and I can get to that. But for outbound prospecting, the best, when you get the highest return on prospecting is when you typically have, say, like a minimum, you have a type of customer that's worth at least $10 or $20,000 in lifetime value. And I'm using kind of like in the States. If you are in international markets with a lower cost and you have lower cost of team, that could be lower. So, but there's a certain minimum financial value that a customer is worth for this to make money. If you're in a highly competitive market or you're commoditized, so like most agencies or like VARs, like telephony providers or sales consultants, when it's, again, highly commoditized or you're not differentiated, that makes it more challenging. It's harder to do it with the services. If you're a services business, it's more challenging than if you have a product. And that's really more of a function of a product tends to be more concrete. So it's easy for someone who doesn't know you to say, oh, you sell cups. Oh, I know what a cup is. Do I want it or not? But if you sell accounting, I know what accounting is. What does that really mean? It's just kind of harder there's so many versions of accounting. So there's some of these aspects that kind of say, if you want the highest return is you have a unique product that's differentiated. You have customers that can generate a lot of a high financial return, and that's really, I mean, honestly, that's pretty much it for customers. So any SaaS company almost is guaranteed they should be doing prospecting as long as they've got like B2B customers. It's not like single, really small customers. If you're a services company, maybe kind of depends. Do you have something that's more kind of like product type or packaged, or are you in like a unique market, or do you have a unique offering or something that's kind of different or very targeted, hyper targeted? So there's ways, a lot of services companies do make prospecting work, but a lot don't. So it's a kind of question of you need to be just better at execution and better at doing it to make it work if you're in the challenging zones. It's like marketing. It's like content marketing. A lot of people make it work, but sometimes you're in a place where you just need to be that much better if you're in a highly commoditized or really noisy market.
Yeah, I think I agree with you because some businesses are easier to do than others. And it depends upon what you're picking up. What sometimes happens with people who will listen to this is they have family businesses, right? So a lot of these businesses, even in the US, 70% of businesses are still family owned. So these kids don't have a choice, right? I mean, they have a choice, but they don't take that choice. So they've got this going on, and they're not able to understand what you're saying. And there are certain businesses which are easier than others, and you should be able to, as an entrepreneur, figure out what you're made for. If you have the skin for that tougher business, definitely go and do it. But there is an easier way to scale a business up. Okay, Darren, I want to ask you a couple more questions for this. But if I go back to predictable revenue, what can I learn from that book? If you can give some insights about that.
Well, again, they're different. So if you are a CEO or an entrepreneur or CFO or CMO, it's kind of like almost anyone who's not a VP of sales, you should start with the Impossible to Inevitable book, right? Because in fact, a lot of the questions you're asking come from that book, right? There's, I'm stuck because I've kind of plateaued or I'm not getting the growth I want. So that book goes into nailing a niche, creating predictable pipeline, and so on. So if you are a VP of sales or you're a CEO who is very hands-on with sales specifically, then, again, the predictable revenue book is probably a better place to start. It's much more sales tactical, and it goes into topics like sales management. And, there's one of my favorite sections in there, which I don't really hear about from people, but it's one of my favorites, is how to involve your sales team in the design of its comp plan. But so I think, if you're basically hands-on in sales, predictable revenue, and if you're anyone else, marketing, CFO, CEO, COO, president, the Impossible book, any entrepreneur, it's the best place to start. I've heard from people, they're very different books. Even though some of the ideas get refreshed in the Impossible book, they are very different.
Wow. Okay. Understood. One learning, and then I just want to come to your personal life, because pretty interesting. Uh, One thing that I can take away from both these books if I'm watching this video today.
I think that growth and growing a company is something that, it's not easy, but it's like the challenges are very identifiable. The solutions are identifiable. It doesn't mean they're necessarily easy to do. Like, for example, it's one thing to say, oh, you haven't nailed your niche and you need to find the pain, you need to find the pains, and sounds easy. That can be challenging, but like growth can be a system, and there's a system to it. And you just need to kind of look at your business that way and identify those bottlenecks, which again, these books can help you do. And to kind of understand, okay, what do I need to do next? I think realistically too, again, it takes years. So back to the impossible, with a section called Do the Time, it says, look, it takes a couple of years to go from zero to something, okay, is this going to work? And probably 5 to 10 years to exit. So just really realizing a lot of this stuff takes more time than you want. But
absolutely. Do you see businesses lasting 40 years in the coming years, Aaron? Do you think something like Facebook will be around in 2040?
See, I have no idea. I think for those big companies, there's so much inertia. I would assume that like all the big companies will be around, 2040 is in 20 years, probably in some form. But yeah, I have no idea. I wouldn't even want to try to guess. Well, we know for sure there'll be other big companies that come out of nowhere.
Yeah. Well, Instagram's only 8 years old, right? I mean, think about that. It's only 8 years old, and what they've
really? It's only 8. Oh.
Yeah. Right. When they got $1 billion from Zuckerberg, they had a team of 13 people, 13.
Yeah.
So it's insane. All right. So now the last thing I have, and again, this is really important because I've been digging into. I don't know if you know Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's written a book on the science and the spirituality of being human. And combining that whole energy about how do you live your life. So when I went through your profile and we speak about you having the life that, let's say, you wanted. So I mean, somebody chooses to have 9 kids, especially when half of them are adopted. And you told me last time that it's a decision that you and your wife took together. It's a mutual decision. Given the fact that you have a $5 million business and you work 20 hours a week. You've definitely figured a lot about personal life as well. Where does that awakening in an entrepreneur like you come from? Because a lot of people get lost in money. It's tough, right? I mean, you're making money, you've got clients, you're in that zone, and then, you can be in that group for the rest of your life. Where does it come from? How does one entrepreneur find that? And how do you manage everything? You spoke about the 4 blocks, but I wanted to get into details of those. Yeah. So that's my last question.
Yeah. Well, by the way, the 4 blocks. So he's talking about on my calendar. A lot of my stuff is run by calendar. And the 4 blocks will be having blocks for work, for family time, like bedtime, breakfast time. So that's work, family, and then romantic time or dates, which haven't happened enough this year with the pandemic. And the last one is time for myself, like exercise or a hobby. It doesn't happen. That's the one I struggle with. So, if it's not on the calendar, it doesn't happen because there's always some kid needs something. It's constant. So that is one of the key things I do to manage it. A lot of it just take it day by day. There's so much chaos and uncertainty with a big family and business, and even before the pandemic. I'll have goals and plans, but I hold them lightly because things change, all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I think having, ironically, the idea of predictable revenue for most people comes from the sense of, it could be you want to the desire to grow a company, but it also comes from a place of fear, which is, if I don't have predictable revenue, it's kind of like wanting some security. I don't know, it's bad. Like everyone wants predictable revenue. So myself. Yeah. So I think the one thing I've learned having a big family is just also to be able to have to go with the flow more, because you never know what crisis or emergency or schedule change is coming, because there's always something every day. every day, just
yeah.
navigating all that and knowing it all works out. Like I'm old enough now where even earlier this year when the pandemic started, you know, I told my company, you know, I tell people I was posting on LinkedIn, you know, this is going to be probably really challenging and people already have lost jobs and businesses, but ultimately if you kind of lean into it and you embrace the change and invest in yourself and your business and kind of adapting, you're going to come out in a better place. It might take a year or 3 or 5. And our business, you know, we struggled for a bit, but we're in a better place. I know a lot of people internally were really scared, still are scared. And they said that I felt very optimistic. I said, it's not optimism. It's just once you've been through these ups and downs enough times, you're like, you know, I've been through a divorce, I kind of have a business, went out of business. There's economic downturns. I don't know, you get through it somehow. And then just.
So you know about this guy, Dan Kennedy?
The marketing guru?
Yeah, the marketing guy. So he speaks about the affluent, and he says that, you know, you would not know, but most affluent people are scared because they don't want to go back to the life when they didn't have money. So they value time, but they are scared. They live in fear all the time, which is why they work so hard. So when you said what you said right now, you know, I could resonate with that. Because I've seen my company grow in the last 5 years in terms of, you know, where it started. The same thing. The first 2 years was a struggle. In the next 2 years, you know, kind of getting it consistent. And now it kind of grew this year pretty fast. And then we are looking to grow very fast right now. But I got more scared, you know, while growing the business, because the more money I started to make, the more scared I got, because I remember when I started the company with $100 and I had nothing in my pocket. I don't want to lose what I have, but it's a very weird thing, what you said. So it's psych. Okay. So now just last thing I want to know from you, again, coming back to that question, where does a person like you know, get that awakening, you know, when you've been with the best out there, that there is other part of the life that I need to pay attention. Where does that part of Aaron come from? Is it from your upbringing? Is it something that happened to you in your life? Or there has to be something that got you to this, you know?
You know, part of it is I was always, you know, I was always interested in things like Buddhism and spirituality, but really it was when I got married and had kids. So and I had my own fears around getting married and having kids. But like having kids really was, you know, one, I don't know, maybe like the most life-changing event, definitely the most life-changing event for me and what it's like to have kids. And just kind of listening to myself, you know, I can't say there wasn't like a reason we said we want to have a big family. Like, oh, we should, like, we didn't adopt kids to, you know, because it's the right thing to do, because we're supposed to. We did it because it just kind of felt right. And we didn't have a big family for religious reasons. We just kind of felt like that was the thing we wanted to do. You know, more of like, again, like kind of like that gut feeling. So I think too, a lot of what I do, you know, we're wired, I'm wired, you're wired for aversion to loss. Like you said, you know, the studies show that we get twice the negative impact of losing $100. It's like, that's like double the negativity as the positivity of gaining 100. Right. So we're wired to avoid loss. And I do my best to be aware of that in kind of moving forward in life, like, okay, saying yes to things and just kind of, you know, listening to like my gut or my heart, just what feels right, and trying to be aware of when my fear comes in. You know, and we're wired like, so fear of losing time, fear of losing money, fear of you know, a bigger family. Okay, now how's that going to affect current children or business? So I think it's just practicing when certain times and things just feel right, and maybe the money doesn't make sense. So just practicing, listening to that and doing that. Don't always get it right, but just that's one example of, we have all these desires and whispers that we ignore because they're not practical. So I practice listening to myself. Always getting better. I wouldn't say I'm great at it, better than I used to be, but that's probably the thing one of the things that really has helped me the most.
I've not met somebody who's got the balance, if you want to call it, that you have. And it's very rare. I mean, it's just very rare how you're able to do that, Aaron. That's pretty special what you've got together. And I know what you mean when you say you're not sure about getting married and then having kids, because I got married 2 years back. And honestly speaking, I probably never wanted to get married because I enjoyed my freedom. And we've not had kids yet. We've not had kids yet because, but you know, when you say what you say, maybe I'll feel it someday. I don't think it will be with 9 kids, but maybe I'll feel it someday.
What?
So I appreciate this. I genuinely, yeah. Say, you were saying something.
Well, yeah, I think too, one thing I learned is you choose your freedoms. If you don't have kids, you can choose the freedom of time. If you have kids, you give up that freedom for the freedom of kind of love and different freedoms. So it's not that you give up one, you know, there's more than one kind of freedom.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you making time again.
Thanks. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Okay. Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too.
New Year's.